Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to our session today. We're going to talk about going from awareness to adaptation and look at a campus strategy for AI literacy. And it is a strategy that you would be able to adopt and adapt. And we have a lot of resources to share with you today, as we always try to do. And then also a lot for conversation and sharing across the community. So starting once again, I'm Brett Christie, VP for Educational Innovations and Inclusivity at Alchemy. And I've been in that position for a little over 4 years, and I get to do a lot of really fun and creative thought leadership and helping to build things that go into our platform, how we engage and support educators and those that are supporting teaching and student success. And so here we go with another one of our webinars today, and these have always been fun to develop and participate in with you. So just looking at a session overview, so we've got a framework that we'll introduce to you, and you'll get to know the name of that and why it's called the Lead AI Literacy Framework. We'll break that down with you, and we'll actually go through each of the 4 pillars. We'll go through examples. We'll go through micro lessons that you'll have access to. We'll talk about implementation strategies, the resources that can help you with those efforts, and then we'll have reflection opportunities and engagement opportunities as we go through this. Okay, chat's quite active. I love it. Keep it going. We're going to first, though, do a check-in regarding your AI literacy status. So we're going to do a quick poll, and this is anonymous, but what best describes your current approach to integrating AI into teaching and learning? So that could be as an instructor, an instructional developer, as somebody who's a faculty developer that's impacting teaching and learning. Okay, and we'll let that populate for a little bit. I'm seeing we're at about halfway response rate. Great. I won't wait to exhaust that completely, but I want to make sure people have the opportunity. And I see people sharing in chat as well. Yes, maybe you're on mobile and it's difficult to get to the poll. Thank you for doing that. I usually like to remind people. Great. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the results then. And so what we're seeing here is a pretty bell-shaped curve, but certainly more toward the I am experimenting with AI in small ways level. So we're still at the earlier stages. We've got close to half that would be at the first couple levels there. And then we have some that are definitely more advanced on the other side on levels 4 or 5. And hopefully you're seeing the results here. It didn't pop up on my screen, but I can see it live in my tools. Okay, great. Thank you. And we'll capture that for you in case it's useful information for your conversations. We always like to offer that, not just for today, but something that you can have. So we'll put that into the deck just after this slide if that's something that's of use. But again, we're looking at, and I'll actually analyze, on a scale of 1 to 5 where things landed, the mean rating. But I'd say we're about a 2.3 or so. So good, experimenting, but probably a learning curve still to be climbed. Okay, so let's do something a little bit different now. I haven't done this in a while. Let's go back to the tool called Answer Garden. This is a great simple tool just to kind of capture groupthink in a moment. And so you've got the link in chat and you'll see me going there. Hopefully people are hearing me. I saw one person saying they're not hearing me speak anymore, and maybe it's a bandwidth issue. Hopefully folks are hearing me. Okay, great. So now that we're at the Answer Garden, what terms come to mind when you think of AI literacy? And these are designed to be individual terms or 1 to 2 words that connect together. And you can submit as many of those as possible, but there's a 20 character limit. And I'll refresh this occasionally. And let me go back to the QR code briefly. You all are in your browser, so go ahead and keep doing what you're doing within the Answer Garden. And here's the QR code one more time. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to the Answer Garden. Hopefully that helped, Deborah. Okay, let me refresh and see where we're at. Awesome. Okay, ethics, great. Yes, that is critical. And then built around that, you'll see things around awareness, limitations. You'll see some tool names mentioned here, but what we're going to talk about today would apply across many of the AI tools that are available. Ethical use, bias, understanding. We're going to cover those as topics. We're going to look at those in action, so to speak, and in learning. And then going deeper into specifics like lit review, rhetorical literacy, misinformation. You'll probably see hallucinations in here somewhere. Okay, great. I'll do one more refresh. And then this is something that I will also capture and we'll put into the deck as well. Again, in case it's useful for framing a conversation at any of your local sessions. Okay. Prompts and prompt engineering, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how you prompt in, but also how you analyze what you receive. And I know this has been an ongoing conversation and many of you have been involved in those. So we'll look at some practical ideas here. Okay. One more poll question, then we're going to drive forward. So real quick, which aspect of AI literacy do you currently want to develop most in your role? Okay, so looking at that 1 to 5 choice, picking one of those. Doesn't mean you won't evolve, but where are you focusing currently in your role? And our leader currently is creating adaptable strategies for curriculum integration. Great. Followed by engaging students in responsible AI use. Very important. And to engage them, hopefully you're modeling, which means hopefully you're doing it very well yourself. So it's that process of learning to be skilled at it, knowledgeable and skilled at it yourself, and then being able to integrate it with students through modeling and through integration. Okay, so we're at about 3/4 response rate. Let's go ahead and publish. Great. So again, creating those adaptable strategies is what people are most focusing on currently, followed by the engaging students, as I mentioned, and then developing ethical and transparent AI practices. Great. And we'll be focusing on those three for sure. A little bit about awareness of new AI tools. We're not going to go into the tools, but we do have a micro lesson on that, designed toward that. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing there and let's move forward into the content of our session. So just a definition for convenience sake and a starting point. So AI literacy and educators' definition, the ability to understand, critically evaluate, and responsibly use AI tools and concepts in teaching, learning, and decision-making, because there are so many roles where decision-making is part of what you do outside of teaching and learning. It involves recognizing AI's potential and limitations, addressing its ethical implications, and effectively integrating AI to enhance educational outcomes and foster equitable practices. So that's a 2-sentence definition that's good to start with and to frame things, but we're certainly going to unpack that very much so today. So let's move forward into the elements. Oops. Jumping a little bit, I've had a hand injury, so that'll happen a little bit to me today. So implementing and supporting AI literacy. So why is this so important? And why do we need to really focus on doing it now? So there's a lot of sector reshaping going on. So AI is impacting things, the workforce in general, certain types of industry, technology, health and medicine, the service industry. It's all being reshaped to different degrees at different paces by AI, but it's happening. We've had, many would argue, a skills gap already between how our students are being educated and what's happening in the real world. We're now going to see that that's potentially not only broadening, but deepening in the type of gaps that are happening. What teaching enhancements do we need to make to our practice? And when I say teaching enhancement, that's all about students and how to enable them to learn effectively and learn responsibly as we use AI. Risk mitigation, so things like data privacy and security, that's important. How does all of this, again, I'm going clockwise, how does all of this build into institutional excellence? That you, as many of people at your institution, are prepared to use AI effectively going forward, and how does all of this help to develop an innovation of culture that will continually adapt going forward, that it's not just this frame of time and this task to tackle, but it's going to be this adaptable culture that you're creating and AI is pushing that. In some ways, the COVID situation pushed that as well. As many of you may have attended or are aware of, we did have a recent webinar a few weeks ago talking about getting instructors into the game. And that's where we started sharing our institutional playbook to increase AI literacy, adoption, and efficacy. So that playbook, at that moment, during that session, we were focusing on institutional strategies and what it might look like for a 3-year intentional plan to build AI capacity and year to year build on effectiveness and going into greater depth, starting with baseline assessments and each year moving the things forward. So we focused on that last time. Now what we're doing is we're getting more into the practical implementation of the plan and how you can provide those learning and development experiences for generative AI and literacy. Okay, so this is an extension. If you're familiar with that last session, this is going to go forward from that, so it's not a repeat. And the playbook link and all the resources are coming. That will come to you, and it will come via email. So what it's meant to be AI literate. So we're going to break that definition from earlier down. So it's understanding how AI works, that it's been trained on these vast data sets of resources, text-based, audio-based, video-based, data, web pages, all of those sources, and now it recognizes patterns and predicts outcomes. But it doesn't necessarily have the critical thinking and reasoning or the true comprehension. And you might say, yeah, because things are continuing to evolve. It's getting closer to that. The gap on that is closing. But we still have our specialized skills and our expertise within our domains to be able to check AI and augment AI. So we'll talk about that. Using it as a creative companion, you'll hear that term from me multiple times today, and you would have in the past if you've attended our sessions. So we'll talk about how to integrate the tools thoughtfully, how it complements your creativity, critical thinking, and your workflows. How to promote ethical and transparent use. So how to use it responsibly. And again, we talked about data privacy. We'll talk about fairness, bias, all of those things. And then adapting and evolving with AI. That's our fourth pillar. So let's look at that framework a little bit, but let's look at a comparison between focusing, this is related to Creative Companion. If you were to focus on AI just as a tool, it's a more one-dimensional usage where you're putting in a question and expecting a text output. It's almost like you're using it as a slightly advanced Google search. And I know search is coming into Gen AI, and it can now be used more ways, more natively within Gen AI. It's more output oriented, so the emphasis there would be more on the immediate product rather than the process of creation or learning through that. There's minimal interaction. I won't read all of these because I want to get to the right-hand side. The ones on the left, I've heard UT Austin call these the more transactional components. The ones on the right is where you really start to develop with your generative AI use and your mindset. And that's a term I really like about generative AI, is how do you start getting into that generative AI mindset, that creative or dynamic mindset? So how do you see it as a collaborative process? How do you really think through the process and refine things, judge things, refine things, and then be able to enhance them and then make them your own and then be able to implement them? You'll find more personalized applications rather than just getting answers in a short way. Okay. So keep thinking about AI as a creative companion. Think about the behavioral changes that you can make as you go forward with AI. Okay, I'm going to bring chat back up. It's been a while. I don't like to ignore it, but with so many of you, it may just be the case at times. So this is what we've come up with as far as our lead AI framework. So how do you enable folks to learn about AI, to then be able to know how to effectively engage with it, to acknowledge what they've done, to be open and transparent about it, and then how to continually develop. So let's go into each of those, and then I'll have a micro lesson example as a takeaway. Okay, so for that first pillar, learn, building that foundational knowledge. So understanding the core AI concepts, and how those apply and how they apply specifically in educational settings, how to address AI bias. So we'll focus on that as a micro lesson today. That's very critical. And then adopting a dynamic AI mindset, again, as I talked about, and there's a micro lesson for that, but we won't get to that one today. Okay, so let's look at that micro lesson here. These are the learning outcomes I have. I have them on the slide here, but they're also within the micro lesson, but I wanted to at least give you a quick glance and frame this before we dive into it. We're going to look at the micro lesson, bias in AI, a critical evaluation. Okay, so I'm going to click on the link. Again, you'll get this as a bundle, so you're not going there now, but I'm going to take you there, and I'm going to just zoom in, and hopefully you're able to read that fairly well. And I'm not going to read everything out to you, but each of these is structured the same, where you have the micro lesson header, you have the title for the specific micro lesson. So again, this one on bias in AI. You have that framing box, that blue box there, that this is a micro lesson as part of that larger AI literacy playbook and our framework. And then here's the description that can be used. And again, this is a micro lesson that could be implemented into the LMS for an asynchronous activity. It could be implemented into a workshop series. We'll talk a little bit about our credential. Each of these are micro credentials, these 4 areas of lead. Each of them are micro credentials, and then we have that AI credential wrapped around that. So we'll talk about that later. Okay. So you have a description, you have the learning objectives, and then there's the content outline. And so this is something that would be built out to be delivered to those that are participating in this lesson. So this could be something that's a video that's created and posted, and students are then able to view that. And when I say students, it's really learners. It could be your faculty, staff. You could adapt some of these things for your students depending on the level. So here's the content outline of Introduction to Bias in AI, identifying bias in educational contexts, and then a case study analysis. So let's look at that in this sample activity where you're identifying bias in AI outputs. So this is the instructions for the educators, those that are involved in the lesson. So they read the generated AI output that's going to be given to them. They apply the bias detection checklist, which is down below. They reflect and respond. And then there's a discussion. And depending on how you would be implementing this, it could be an asynchronous discussion within an LMS, or it could be in breakout groups synchronously in Zoom, or it could be breakout groups on your campus in a workshop. So different ways that you would implement that discussion. So here's a simple example. The prompt given to AI: explain the history and cultural significance of the Silk Road, highlighting its role in connecting East and West. So you can see the AI response here. Okay, again, this is looking at AI where you're giving a simple prompt, maybe not thinking through the variables of that prompt clearly, which we'll get to in the next micro lesson, and then seeing that you get a result here that is pretty limited and also has several biases, and we'll look at those very quickly. So here's the checklist students would be given with that response, and it gives them the questions to ask as they review that response. And then they respond to those, and they have their reflection based on that checklist. Okay. And then each of these has the instructor key. Now, these aren't multiple choice questions. There is instructor interpretation, of course, as to what the right answers are, but this is designed to inform you as the instructor. Okay, here's what was intended to be analyzed. Here are the identified biases. So, and you can look at a couple of those if you want to. I'm going to be careful not to read too much to you today, but I wanted to show you everything that's involved in the detail there for you as far as each of these micro lessons and how they're enabled to build that AI literacy at the different levels, the 4 levels. Okay. So now here's what would be a suggested enhanced AI output. So students would be asked to, okay, improve that enhanced prompt. And so here's the new prompt that could be given to then get these much better results. So it's now putting in more factors to drive the response. It's putting more barriers on there and giving more input and making sure that it's a two-way exchange between the cultures. So there you can see the revised output. Okay, so this is an exercise not just saying, by the way, there can be biases in AI outputs. Be aware, here's an example. It's actually engaging them to reflect, analyze, think, reflect, and come up with ways to improve something like what they've seen here. Okay, so that's one example of a micro lesson. These are designed to be 20 to 30-minute experiences. We haven't really calibrated that completely. We're still in development on many of these, but we wanted to give you a sample. We're trying to keep those to 20 to 30-minute micro lesson experiences. So you might be able to have a workshop on the topic that props it up and then gets them into the engagement, and you can do that in less than an hour total. Okay, so let me go back to Pillar 2, where we talk about engage. So how do you integrate AI effectively and collaboratively? So selecting the AI that's going to be most appropriate for your learning outcomes, your task outcomes. You may be sticking to a large language model like ChatGPT to do most of what you need. That works to me, especially as they become more advanced and multimodal. Or you might be a more specialized user that's going to go into a more research-oriented area like Perplexity. So it really depends on your uses. And then talking about crafting clear prompts, and that's our acronym. And I always like to state that I'm not a fan of the term prompt engineering and never have been. That freaked a lot of people out at the very get-go when we started using the term prompt engineering. They thought that AI was only for computer science majors and instructors and professionals, when really the power is in language and how you craft that language so well and interact with the AI. So we'll look at some examples of how to easily do that. So we usually say crafting prompts, and these are clear prompts. Okay, so let's get into the next micro lesson on effective prompting. There are so many models and acronyms out there. I've seen them as many as 9 letters or 9 variables. I like to keep it a little bit more simplified. Yeah, I'm seeing the response to prompt engineering. That was actually a big thing, and I've seen it less. Luckily, people are kind of, I think, wisening up. Thought partnership, I love that. That's our creative companion aspect right there, thought partnership. Love it, Amber. Okay, so let's go into this micro lesson in AI literacy. This is engaging with AI, and this specifically is focused on prompting, and that's not the only way we're focusing on engaging, but that's our lesson example for today. Yeah, it was a very prominent job category and a very lucrative one for a while, still is in some ways. So let's focus on this micro lesson. There's, again, the format from the top to the description to the learning objectives. Again, duration about 20 to 30 minutes. Here's the framing context that would be offered by the instructor or by the video that's offered to the participants. And then here are the critical elements that are discussed to begin with, is elements that enhance output. So precision, audience tone, context, structure, and then elements that are detrimental if you're ambiguous, overly, or the opposite, overly complex. You're not giving enough guidance on length or type of output. Think of the garbage in, garbage out, or GIGO concept. A lot of people at the beginning said, AI just puts out a lot of garbage, and often I have found it's because garbage went in. And so the prompting framework, clear. So you have your client or audience, and those words don't always resonate within education, but it's designed so that it can be adapted more broadly, and to also have students thinking how they might use it with their eventual clients or audience that they're working with. So think of those as your students in many cases or otherwise. What limitations do you put on there intentionally? What's the expected tone? Could be used formal academic language, could be formal yet inviting language. You decide how you want that to be, you want that to represent you. Additional context, this is where I like to sneak in learning science. So based on cognitive load theory or based on Bloom's level this, and then request specificity. So what do you want the output to be? That's going to save you a lot of formatting on your end, because you're going to get the type of context and content and output that you want the first try. So here's what the original prompt could look like. And again, this is the exercise that would happen through the micro lesson. let's look at column A. Here's what an original prompt would look like. Let's look at column B. And you can do slides if you wanted to, where you show and reveal each of these one by one. That's up to you. But I just wanted to scan some examples here of why these are vague and ineffective on the left, and how they're more effective to do the version that's on the right. And then the practice activity that actually is involved is giving participants, and I'll get down to this. This is a bookmark in the document. It would scroll you down to those Gen AI prompt examples at varying levels of effectiveness. And it also gives you our rubric, which is down further in this document, but you'll also have access as a standalone. And then what they do is they evaluate, and you would scramble those, you would shuffle those 5 prompts in different order. And eventually I'm going to have 10 of those, just so it's easier to have variability of levels and scramble things a little bit. But then you have them analyze them and rank them and give their reasoning. And then you can have them compare to the quote answer key and see how well they did. So in them doing that, they're going to reflect and share their revised prompts and discuss the changes. Again, this is something where you could do a think, pair, share. You could do an asynchronous discussion. You could do breakout groups. There's also a peer review possibility, which I think is great, because you want to have people share how they're thinking about these things and learn from each other when possible. So here's the prompting rubric. And here are the 3 levels. So 10 points possible. You've got 5 criteria. That just helps them to think about how they're performing ahead of time. You're being transparent with them, but it also helps you if you're doing any evaluating of what they submit and then giving feedback. So here are the Gen AI prompts at varying levels. So right now they're stacked up from best to least effective. And each of these scoring 2 points and a little bit of justification as to why it received that score. You all know how rubrics work. I'm just trying to give you a sense of how that's being applied here in this context, down to the weakest level. And again, I would have more of these coming, so there's more variability, and so it's a little trickier maybe. Not to trick people, but just to offer more possibilities. Okay. And we went all the way down on that. And this one, I didn't share the peer review activity, but I have that in a different micro lesson. We'll look at that. Okay, let's move forward. And let's take a pause here. I've been talking for a while, so what I want to do is jump into a Padlet now. And let's look at those first 2 pillars of AI literacy and get your thoughts about the types of things that you're doing currently or could see doing from here forward based on our conversation today. So for now, if you could just focus on pillars or columns 1 and 2, and we'll come back to 3 and 4. The QR code, is that what we're needing? I'll go back because people can still be at the Padlet. I'll pause here for, let's say, 10 seconds or so. Sorry about that. And for those in the Padlet, feel free to go on. I'll join you there again in a moment. And hopefully, great, everybody's got that. And let me hit refresh. Great, and I see a response building a foundation. If you have anything to add to that, to clarify to that, that would be great. What are the things that you're looking at? Attending webinars, reading, playing around. There is so much information out there. It's overwhelming. So find your best sources, filter those, sign up to those. We offer our webinars every 3 to 4 weeks. And again, we've been trying to provide a lot of good sourced and filtered information, very practical, and resources. So if you're enjoying that, great, keep on coming. Playing around, and I always love when I can see the term play used, because you should really think about playing and experimenting with it, and think about Gen AI, if it's ChatGPT or whatever LLM, think about that as your own personal playground. That's your space where you can learn and experiment and do exactly that. try and figure out what will happen if I do this or I ask this. Oh, okay, I got that result, not necessarily what I wanted. What happens now? So make it a playful exercise with your creative companion, your thought partner. Okay. Great. And a lot of institutions do have series on AI in academia. That's great. Some of them have really been able to jump out with that and develop programs, websites, resources. Everybody's trying something. And so find those best examples. And we're trying to also create a space here for you as well. Okay, doing a time check here. We're good. And I know some have gone ahead to pillar 3 and pillar 4. That's fine. No judgment. Great. Making websites, web pages, informationals. And whenever you can find things that are tangible, hands-on, where people can use guides to experiment, see good examples, not so good examples, and see why. Demonstrations. Okay, I'm going to look at 2 briefly. Creating simulated experience for students with chatbots. And there's a lot happening with chatbots, and that's great, but it's gotten to the point where almost anybody can create a chatbot, and chatbots can be very effective if done really well, if done intentionally and implemented intentionally, but they can also be done very poorly and ineffectively. So you just have to find the right model for chatbots. And I won't plug any at the moment. Great. Teaching faculty the CLEAR model to help demystify how AI works. Yeah, that's one way to do it. And then how you're sharing that with students. And we're going to talk about transparency next. 4 in-services with faculty from experts, building one by one. A roll up the sleeves workshop. Yeah. And it's great to have those moments where you just kind of let faculty loose. You got them in your lab, maybe they're virtually, and then have them come back together. What did you try? How did it work? What did you learn? Love all of this. I won't be able to get to all of it, and that's not the goal. This is about you sharing with each other. And what I will be doing with Padlet is I'll actually be analyzing this and putting the analysis into the next slide in the deck that's hidden currently, but it'll be there when you get it. I used to export as CSV from Padlet directly and then have to do all sorts of massaging of the data. It was complicated to get it to understand the CSV the way I wanted it to. Now what I have found recently is I can export as ping, an image file, and give it to ChatGPT with simple instructions, and it will analyze it for me column by column and give me a summary of responses, the most critical things that people shared. And it does it really well. And that works in a matter of just a minute or two. I'm able to have all of that. And I love that because it's actually a case where Gen AI is removing bias. I've done workshops where I have people responding on Post-its and they put them on different poster boards. And then I go around and I kind of analyze and summarize what they've said and tell them. I'm filtering through my biases. If somebody's responded the way I wanted, I'm going to tend to prop that up more and reflect that in my thinking and out to them again. But by having ChatGPT do it with simple instructions, it's then telling me what you all said rather than what I wanted to be said. So I like using that. Amy, repeat what was described. Was that the analysis of this, the way to do it? I'll be quick if so. Okay. Yeah, if you go to share and export as image. And I won't go beyond this because I want to get back. This is where you could then say generate. It'll export this as a PNG, an image file. You could then take that, drop it into ChatGPT and tell it to analyze that and give you a summary of each of the columns as to what was stated, what were the main ideas, et cetera. However you wanted to frame it, use the clear prompt. So does that help? You know, Gloria, what I can do is I can share that. I don't have that on hand. I didn't anticipate that, but I can grab an example. And in fact, I did this just on Monday for a session I did, and I'll grab that prompt and send it out. Okay, great. Let me jump out of that. And I'm glad that was of interest. That wasn't planned, but it's good to know just simple tricks like that that can save you a lot of time and actually create another use out of this experience. Okay. So let's go to pillar 3. Let's talk about acknowledge, promoting transparency and ethical responsibility. So ethics were addressed in the first, the learn pillar. You learned about ethics and how that's important. But now it's actually implementing as an ethical responsibility and use. So putting it in action and modeling that. So we'll talk about transparency. Let's focus actually on looking at, let's look at transparency in a micro lesson here. And you can see the 2 other objectives that have micro lessons coming. Okay, so here's the documenting and disclosing AI use. You can see the outcomes that have been propped up there. I'll leave those up briefly, but you'll see them pretty much reflected in the micro lesson as well. So let's just go ahead and jump to that. This is just to give you a starting point. And let's see, I think my Zoom is still there. Let me know if that's not working. So again, you've got your header, you've got the description that can be provided by whoever's implementing this. Again, we will have our micro-credential that we can give you more information about at the end, but we're offering this as a sample for you. Okay, the learning objectives, again, you have there. Now, I normally don't like understand as a learning objective because understand isn't measurable. Consider isn't specifically measurable either, but it's a part of this continuum and it's being applied. So I'm okay with that in this case. But normally I would not put that into my course learning outcomes. So guidance for micro lesson topic delivery for the facilitator. So here's how that would take place. So start with a brief discussion, discuss real world examples. That's coming down further. Explanation of documentation techniques. So is it footnoting? Is it annotating on slides? Is it giving a handout on it? Or is it some sort of assignment brief? Okay, and then what is an AI disclosure statement, depending on what the individual has done with AI, and I'll share one in a minute as well in my transparency. Okay, it could be in your syllabus, it could be in your assignments, it could be in your content, depending on where you've used AI, and then you want to model that for your students, so then when you're holding them accountable, then they're able to do the same thing. And this relates to, some of you may have attended our webinar where we focused on the AI and assessment levels, the 5 levels that have been identified by Perkins et al. We had a session in August and another one in September, and we developed about 20 living assignment examples across those 5 levels, across different discipline types and of different assignment types. So you can always refer back to those if you want to see how to control for or manage or have students experience AI in an intentional way at the level that you would like. Okay, engaging in discussion. And then here's the implementation guideline for those implementing this. So again, 25 to 30 minutes maybe on this one. And then you'll want printed or digital copies of the sample activities materials below. So those are coming. And again, maybe electronic, posted on the LMS. The disclosure checklist, so that's coming. The workshop. Yes, Jennifer, we're going to give you the link to our playlist at the end. So yeah, thank you for asking. Absolutely. And each of our webinars comes bundled with all the resources. So you'll get a link to that source at the end here. Okay, so assessment and feedback. So you'll look at their disclosure statements. You could even do a peer review and then their reflection responses. How did this get them to think differently in going through this process? Okay, so in looking at the actual activity itself, they're going to review the AI-generated and educator-edited statements below, which you'll see. Here's the prompt as a sample. And then here's the AI output as an example from that prompt. Now, here's what the instructor may have done with that prompt and how they might have shared it with their students. And so you would compare the original to the edited version and how much the instructor did to change, to modify, to improve or enhance that, and what those changes were. And as you do that compare and analyze, you would go through the guiding questions for comparison. And then you would come up with a statement that discloses how much AI was or wasn't used in that process to develop that content, we'll call it. Okay, and so they'll draft a disclosure statement, and then those can be shared in a discussion, again, synchronously or asynchronously. And then you could always give them feedback as the facilitator. Okay, and then there are the reflection discussion questions that it can happen different ways, individually written, think, pair, share, think, pair, square, whatever you want to do with those. Ah, great, somebody's sharing the resources already in the chat. Love it. Okay, so let's jump down to what the instructor answer key might look like and how that applies to the example you saw above. So sample answer, the output was initially generated by AI, providing an outline of the topic. However, the educator made significant edits. So that's an analysis of the process. And then there's the feedback that might be given. Okay, clarifying the roles, specifying purpose and limitations. And then now let's look at the disclosure statement example. And there's a sample disclosure statement. This summary was generated with the assistance of an AI tool. You can specify if you want, but that's really if you want them to have that information about what tool it was. You could say Gen AI. And the focus was toward making it most suitable for the first-year biology students. So the instructor did some enhancements just to make sure that it was level set, specific to the objective, to the topic, and presented in the way that they wanted it. And the reflection exercise, I don't want to drag this out too much. I'm just trying to show you what's embedded here and designed here to make this a valid learning experience. Okay, let me jump back. Next one probably won't be as detailed. In developing the playbook, in developing what you're experiencing here today, I used generative AI. I used it to help me ideate, to think about the topic, to think about the flow and the structure, to outline things, to think about what good ideas there might be for engaging people around this. So I used it to help me along the way. It is my creative companion many, many times a day. So I'm very transparent about that, and I'm grateful for it. So much that can be done. Having a tool set to work with it effectively, there's so much that you can do. And I love how it can get me to, okay, I'm at this place now where I can really dig in with everything that I know, my past experience, my knowledge, my intentions, and I can really hone in and create. Let me go back to chat. Okay. Okay, last level develop. So how to stay current and adapting with AI advances, because we know that's happening. That, there's talk of, well, maybe as far as the speed and processing, things are plateauing a little bit, but there are advances in types of AI tools and types of applications that'll continue to happen as well. I'm always really excited about the multimodal aspects and the things that you can do from text to voice, voice to text, to video, to just across all these different content types. Some of you may know my background in universal design for learning. That's where I get really excited about the multimodal possibilities because of engaging more learners or providing access to more learners. So I think that's really exciting. The agents are coming, Amber shares. So yes, there's definitely the AI agents. I don't want to break that down right now, what that means necessarily. Amber, feel free if you want to offer any explanation, but how AI can run your computer for you. You're telling it tasks and it's actually doing all of the functions with your applications. It's wild. So we could definitely get off tangent here or on tangent. Okay, staying current and adapting, let's take a brief look at what that looks like. I always like to mention modeling a growth mindset. If you think about what AI can and can't do right now, you can always add the word yet, because it's coming. And that growth mindset you always want for yourself and for your students. This isn't happening yet. It's a process. Okay, let's look at flexible strategies for adaptation and how to integrate new tools with agility and purpose. So this is where you can take folks that you're working with and get them to get outside of their comfort zone. Okay, that did not link. I think I clicked in the wrong spot. But this is about, okay, people are feeling pretty good about ChatGPT maybe. How can you get them to look at other tools possibly, or other uses of that tool? Okay, you're great at putting in a text prompt, a clear prompt, and getting out text. What can you do with images, video, creating audio, all those things? Okay, so you got your usual headers here. Kelly, hopefully that's in a good way. A lot of good information, a lot to take in, a lot to stay on top of. Okay, I'll scroll the objectives, get to the content again. Here's what would be propped up as the learning experience. And then how to design a flexible AI integration plan. So this is where you can get users to think of where they are now and thinking next steps. Okay, so they're planning to introduce an AI tool in their course to support a specific learning objective. It's to create they're going to create a flexible integration plan for that and see how that goes. So task instructions, step one, set a focus. What are the goals? And then what's your pilot plan? So what's a low stakes activity that you can try out? And again, this is something you can try first, of course, before doing this with your students. You want to know how it works and then be able to make any modifications. And then how will you eventually collect feedback from students as you're integrating that? And then how will you assess the tool's impact on student learning or engagement? So as you get more comfortable with integrating AI, again, think of those, I mentioned the 5 levels of AI and assessment earlier, from going from level 1, which is no AI, which there are times where you want there to be no AI, but how do you progress forward to be able to enable students to go to using AI for just a little bit of brainstorming and ideation, to use it to help it build and draft things to a certain point, to use it to help write out things, but they still reflect on it. So you can decide what level of integration and prop that up purposefully, and then be able to implement it and try it with your students, then be able to reflect on how well it went, what you would do differently, and then find out from students what was their experience like and what did they learn. So let me go into this activity, and I need to spend a minute or so scrolling through what's left here. So this is where you're going to get them engaged in the activity, and they will exchange plans with each other. This is where I embedded a peer review task sheet, which I think is great, especially for them to do this before they get to live implementation. Okay. And the peer review sheet did not get added on here. We have an updated version we'll upload. It's a very simple peer review sheet, but I think it's important to give a model of structure for that and how you can use that again in a live setting or have that as a peer review task through your LMS. So we'll have that added on probably by the time you get access to it or go to it. Okay, so let's go ahead with time and cognitive load consideration. I think you get the idea certainly across the 4 pillars, how you can approach that through multiple micro lessons, and then end up with the micro credentials is how we're approaching it for each of the 4 pillars, and then the credential in AI literacy across as a whole. Okay, let's have you jump back to the Padlet. I know the link's being put into chat, so I will freeze here with the QR code. You go ahead and join back in the Padlet briefly. I'll join you momentarily, and then we'll do some final discussion and wrap on that, and then we'll get to resources. Yeah, I'm going to go about 5 more seconds on the QR code here. And I'm seeing Daisy's comment, if we replace the term AI with computer, it's not really that new. Yes and no. AI is vastly different from any tool we've seen before. Tools like, computers in general and tools in general, digital tools in general, have a pretty fixed purpose or functionality, where AI is so complex and multifaceted, can go so far and do so many things differently. And it can also be responsive. You can dialogue with it. Even though it's using the prediction modeling, it learns how to discourse with you, and you can actually do so much more. And that's why I have that creative companion mindset, where you really want to think about pushing the boundaries of what a tool is and thinking about it as a more behavioral interaction. So that would be only my clarification there. Okay, so I will jump just jump into Padlet with you. And we'll look for a few highlights potentially. Not trying to get to all of them, but thank you for sharing, adding a statement in your syllabus. And at the beginning, everybody was really working 2 years ago this week. Everybody was really working on, okay, we have to have an institutional policy. Then the next term, early 2023, it was, okay, course policies. Let's focus on course policies. And there have been hundreds of these shared out, crowdsourced into a document. I think it's Lance Eaton, I hope I have that correct, who crowdsourced all of those into a document. And some of you might have that to put into the chat. That'd be great. So course policies, those are good to have, but that just starts a conversation. And a course policy is something that can be very fixed. And really what you want to do is not think about the course policy, but then how do you implement at the assignment or assessment level or experience level for the students? So yes, the syllabus, but make sure you're being clear about how AI applies to the different assignments or assessments. Thanks, Ashley. I think if that's the one. How it can help or hinder critical thinking. Yes, it can do both for sure. It's really how you intentionally apply it and get students to reflect on it and critique it and apply that critical thinking as part of the process. I see a library made a LibGuide. Some people say LibGuide. I apologize. I'm not sure which. It's different people. On AI, great. And a section on citation, love it. And there's MLA, APA, different models there that you can adopt. Main thing is transparency. And then if you're going into obviously a formal publication, then you can use whichever model is more formal. Okay, and then last on develop, because we are at time, I better just step away. Thank you. And again, I will provide the analysis. You'll get that in the deck, and it may be even included as a standalone doc in the resources that we send to you, because hopefully it generates ideas for you that others are sharing. Okay, so back to the deck. And so we've got our AI literacy collection. And again, this is based in our institutional playbook, and that picture says October 23rd. It's actually been updated as of this morning, up through this morning, and we'll continue to enhance that with more examples. But we'll provide the link for you today to that collection, which is the playbook, but also the collection has the different micro lessons that I've shared with you, and the clear rubric itself as a standalone, even though it's embedded in the second micro lesson. So I'm going to click on the link here, which you'll get momentarily, and just give you a quick snapshot. So here's our lead AI literacy framework. And within that, you've got the playbook as the one sort of all-containing document, but then you've got the standalone resources here as the micro lessons, and again, the clear prompting rubric. All of those available for you. And as I mentioned, we're developing out the micro credentials and the credential as we further flesh out the micro lessons that are drafted so far, but the additional micro lessons, we would love to hear from you if you are interested in finding out more information about that credential and those micro credentials. And I'm seeing the thumbs and applause. Thank you so much. Thanks, Ashley and others. Paul, yes, there's a lot of noise out there, and it can be overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming at times. So be kind to yourselves and realize that it's all a lot out there. So pace yourselves, find the best sources, find the best colleagues, and just move forward mindfully and intentionally and do what's within your power. Because we know the level of burnout out there. We know that this is a big new area that's moved quickly, and it's changing what we're doing within our worlds in academia and also the world around us and where students are going to land. Appreciate the notes there. Glad this is useful. And we're just at about time. Perfect. And I will keep looking at chat. I want to thank you for your time and contributions. I look forward to digging into the Padlet, to the chat transcript, which we always clean up and then offer as a resource, because you've been sharing things in there that we want others to be able to have access to related to this topic. So we will include that as well. Always know that we'll share that out with you, and it'll come automatically within a matter of a few days, couple to a few days. I know we're coming to a holiday week for many. I hope you have a wonderful, restful holiday and come back excited for the final stretch of the semester. Again, be kind to yourselves and be with your loved ones. Thank you.